Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, for the next one. Oh, I thought you said I missed this one. No, you didn't. Now there was.
Welcome, Commissioner Harvey.
How are you?
Very well. So glad to have you here today. So you're free to give us your testimony.
Thank you very much. Good morning, and I have to my left Andy Beers, who's our Exec Dep of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation. Good morning, Chairwoman Young, Chairman Farrell, and distinguished members of the Tourism and Parks Committee and the Legislature, and thank you for inviting me to discuss Governor Cuomo's executive budget. As Commissioner of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation, I'm charged with overseeing the New York's outstanding system of 180 parks and 35 historic sites. New Yorkers take great pride in their parks, and thanks to Governor Cuomo's leadership, we've done much more to connect more people to parks, revitalize facilities, keep parks and historic sites open and welcoming, and provide outstanding recreational and interpretive experiences for residents and tourists alike. The 2016-17 executive budget maintains level funding for park operations, provides robust capital funding to continue the modernization and revitalization of our facilities and infrastructure, and last but not least, dramatically increases the Environmental Protection Fund to help enhance our stewardship of the natural and cultural resources. The park system, again this year, has been very busy and very successful. We had historic high attendance at our parks, our beaches, our campgrounds. Letchworth and Watkins Glen State Park were ranked the first and the third best state parks in America by readers of USA Today. Our facilities last year and this year will host many more major events, concerts, festivals, athletic competitions to provide a deeper and better experience for our visitors and in turn provide an economic boost to the local economies. A few examples: the Smorgasburg Market at East River State Park in Brooklyn, the Memorial Day Air Show, the now reinstated 4th of July fireworks and holiday light show at Jones Beach, celebrations to come of the 50th anniversary of Saratoga Performing Arts Center, the first marathon walkway over Hudson. This year, Bethpage State Park in Farmingdale is scheduled to host the Barclays PGA Tour, followed by the PGA Championship in 2019 and the Ryder Cup in 2024. These events bring hundreds of thousands of visitors and worldwide television coverage. As part of Governor Cuomo's New York Parks 2020 plan to invest $900 million in state parks by 2020, the executive budget continues to make significant capital investments in our parks and historic sites that will serve their communities and anchor our tourism economy. This year, using funds allocated in fiscal year 2015 and earlier, we will begin construction to modernize and create the Cave of the Winds Museum Interpretive Ticket Center at Niagara Falls State Park. We'll break ground on a new marketplace at Jones Beach State Park, and we're going to complete the major rehab of the historic West Bathhouse. We'll open a state-of-the-art nature center at Letchworth State Park. We're hosting visitors now to the just-opened Seneca Art and Cultural Center at Ganondagan State Historic Site. And we're welcoming campers to Schodack Island State Park in the Hudson Valley, where we built the system's first new full-service campgrounds in decades. Of course, we continue to fix and modernize the infrastructure throughout all our parks on which these basic and new services rely. In fact, since the Governor launched Parks 2020, we have advanced more than 230 separate projects within 133 parks and historic sites to enhance, restore, repair our public facilities. From the opening of the new Buffalo Harbor State Park to the transformation of Roberto Clemente State Park in the Bronx, our parks depend on this infrastructure. This year's executive budget provides another $90 million in annual capital funding for state parks improvements, which will leverage a broad range of additional public and private funding to match it and allow us to finish what we started last year and begin new and critically important projects across the state, including the complete redo of the Watkins Glen entrance, the Thatcher Visitor Center, the much improved Green Lakes Campground, new cottages at Sampson, and then fixing and modernizing the numerous sewer, water, and electric systems that need to be updated. Once complete in 2020, we will have made transformative changes at over 30 of our flagship locations and those parks that serve communities of need, and we will touch almost every other park. As you know, the governor has proposed to nearly double the Environmental Protection Fund. As a result, all of the EPF funding for programs traditionally administered by state parks will increase, including state land stewardship funding, which is crucial to our staff's work to protect and provide access to the natural and cultural resources that our parks shelter. The EPF budget continues two new programs established last year, the Park and Trail Partnership Program. With the assistance of Parks and Trails New York, it provides competitive grants to our friends group that support our parks and our historic sites, and the Excelsior Conservation Corps program, a hands-on job training program that will enhance the natural resources and recreational opportunities in our parks. Governor has also introduced a new investment that will provide funding to expand environmental education and support the new Connect Kids initiative, which will provide transportation grants to schools to bring children in underserved areas to our state parks and lands. Our agency also administers one of the strongest historic preservation programs in the nation. Last year, the State Historic Preservation Office, SHPO, advanced nearly 100 listings to the State and National Register of Historic Places. State and federal historic rehab tax credits spurred more than $550 million in commercial redevelopment projects statewide, with many more of those located in upstate communities. Applications for the state historic tax credit for homeowners also reached a new high, with over 270 projects in the pipeline for rehabilitation. 2016 is the 50th anniversary of the National Historic Preservation Act of 1966, which established historic preservation policy for the nation. New York will join nationwide efforts to recognize that event. Thank you again for all your commitment to our magnificent state parks, all your support for our agency, and all of your partnership through thick and thin. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Senator Betty Little has a question.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Commissioner. I appreciate you being here. And I'm sure that the number of visitors to our state parks, the increase in the number of visitors can be attributed to the governor's program of putting more money into our state parks and making the improvements, and to you as Commissioner for implementing all these improvements. Our parks have truly had great renovation, great additions, and really good upkeep in the last several years. And of course, I continue to hope and wish that the campgrounds within the Adirondack Park, no offense to DEC, but I would prefer they were under Parks, Recreation, Historic Preservation. Nevertheless, the only thing I saw in the budget that I thought was a concern, and I know it would be a concern to our local governments, is the provisions in the navigation law changing the match for enforcement of the navigation law from 50% to 25%. As you know, there's a lot of boaters on all of our lakes, and our counties and towns that provide this are really strapped and are under a tax cap, which is not even 2% for this year. So I would ask that that be changed, and even go up to 75%, which I think it was at one time. Is there any possibility that could happen?
I think that it is in the budget, and we work in close partnership with the municipalities, and we provide thousands and thousands of hours of training. We also are continuing to buy boats for local municipalities for patrol. And as the reimbursement are for voluntary patrols, it is also spread over 52 different municipalities. So I think that we're just going to have to work to, try to make it work. And it's going to be the municipality's decision as how they do that.
Well, hopefully we can do something about that as well. I really commend you on your app, and I also commend you for getting the voter safety training course online. I think those are two huge improvements, and I appreciate that. I also like to point out that we did pass a commission on the women's suffrage movement, and 2017 will be the year we commemorate New York State allowing women the right to vote. So we're looking for Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation to help us in promoting those things.
We're one of the many partners, and we,
Yes.
and we look forward to working with you.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Assembly, we've been joined by Assemblyman Tone, and next is Assemblywoman Russell.
Thank you. Welcome, Commissioner. I have a couple of questions. The first is, I applaud that the efforts we've made over the last several years in terms of increasing capital funding for our parks infrastructure. But I do know that there's a decrease in funding this year. I'm just wondering, is that because we've cleared a lot of backlog, or what would be the cause for that as we are still trying to get to that goal in 2020 of revitalizing our parks?
So you speak of the 110 to 90 million. The plan, New York Parks 2020, always anticipated 90 million a year for 7 years, with 3 years before and going forward, these 4 years. And the funding was the 110 was a one-time increase last year to address some critical infrastructure issues. But it's always been anticipated that it's 90 million a year.
Okay. I have also received some feedback from my community about the institution of a surprise fee at some of my state parks. And I'm just wondering, is this a conscious decision to create a two-tiered system in our state parks, of one that's affordable and one that's a little less affordable? I really was caught off guard by that new development, also because it wasn't widely publicized and was kind of a shock to folks that make their reservations early and had budgeted for their time at a state park and then found it unaffordable and had to, try to make other arrangements.
The way our camping fees work is that we have a basic fee which has not changed, and then we add on amenities, and always have, and for the history of camping, based on water, degree of electricity, whether it's prime, flagship, and so forth and so on. And so there's been no increase in fees. It's just been, and regularly we adjust those, particularly as we increase electricity or improve campsites and so forth and so on. So it's the camper's choice as to what campsite they pick and go for.
Well, from what I understand, this particular issue was apples to apples. It's just that maybe for some reason the park got a new designation. But the public really isn't made aware of it, and certainly the legislature. And so, I find this to be particularly problematic and disturbing that are we paying for these upgrades out of the general fund? Or are we paying these off of the back of our visitors after the fact? I'm really not comfortable with this bait and switch type of administration to capital improvements. If we're paying for them out of the general fund, I don't expect then on the back end to, charge more and make it unaffordable for long-time park goers who we rely on for their year-to-year business to ensure that we have significant vacancy rates to keep the system strong. So I really feel like the rug has been pulled out from underneath certain people, and I will follow up with your office to get further justification for all of a sudden, change from year to year when there was really no noticeable difference at that particular park.
I appreciate talking to you, and it is what we've been doing for a long, long time, but I appreciate your input, and we'll look at how we do it.
I want to turn now to the portion of the budget that deals with the navigation law and essentially defunding local agencies for providing what ironically is called voluntary enforcement of the navigation law. As you are very well familiar with the St. Lawrence River Valley and your experience there, I'm not sure that you could consider voluntary enforcement of the navigation law in the St. Lawrence River Valley to be voluntary. There are, tons and tons and tons of cargo that go through, huge amounts of recreational tourism in a very tight area. And so having orderly boating and adherence to laws in that area is something of utmost importance. The St. Lawrence Seaway projects that 2,000 jobs are supported based off of that waterway in my district. And to think that it's voluntary to ensure that kind of, which is, sometimes it's not a two-lane highway. You have to go in one direction when you get to the locks. This is essentially has to be provided, will be an unfunded mandate on the localities. And given the economic importance and the environmental significance of this area, I think that maybe perhaps we could have a little bit of a different approach to these very significant areas. And I haven't even touched on the dynamic between Canadian law enforcement and New York law enforcement, whether it's state or local, and the value that local law enforcement officials bring when the state level folks that are assigned to our area can have no idea about the specific geography of a river, that you have to have specialized pilots in order to navigate for large shipping. Really needs, I think, to be looked at. And, I just will note that last year, an quote-unquote accident almost derailed the Governor's Bassmaster tournament because it would have shut down shipping. And so I know that your office and the Governor's office is aware of this, and I certainly in the future would not like to see this referred to as kind of a voluntary obligation to ensure that one of the most strategic waterways in the nation and the world is not going to be adequately paroled and enforced to keep the safety and commerce moving. And I also, my time is up, but would like to thank Senator Little for bringing up the 100th anniversary celebration of women's suffrage, and would hope that the department could play a more lead, aggressive, prominent role in ensuring that we celebrate it as it's due. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Commissioner, first I want to note that we've been joined by Senator Patty Ritchie, who will speak in a minute. But I had a couple of questions. First of all, sincerely, congratulations on the designation of Letchworth State Park by USA Today as the #1 park in the entire country. And as you know, I represent about half of the park, so it was thrilling for me to be able to see that accomplishment. And I fully agree with the readers that it is the #1 park, although I shouldn't tell my other parks that, because I think you also know that I represent about 7 other parks, Midway Park in Chautauqua County, Long Point Park, Lake Erie Park. We've got Allegheny State Park, and we've got, on the border, we've got the Stony Brook Park. We've got the Greenway Trails, Genesee Greenway. So, as you know, I have a strong interest in the park system. I was interested to hear your response regarding the reduction in the governor's budget proposal of $20 million from the capital funds, taking it back to $92.5 million. And the question I have is that, and we face this year after year, in that there's kind of a broad overview of capital, and there is no detail, however. And so it's challenging for us, I believe, as legislators. We want to make sure that we know how we're allocating money. Is there any possibility that we could get a list of the capital projects that you're looking at this coming year?
Absolutely.
That would be great.
Yes.
Thank you. That's basically all I had. Any other assembly members?
Do you have any more, Denny? No. Oh, Dee Dee Barrett.
I was going to run.
Assemblywoman Barrett.
Let's see.
Is this working? Yes.
Yes.
Well, thank you for being here, and thank you for, I've enjoyed working with you on lots of projects, and it's just great, all your vision from your leadership, both of you, on so many of these issues. I do want to echo the women's suffrage point that's been made. Is there any money in the budget for working on that this year? Because I think this is obviously something that, we don't just jump in 2017.
So not at this point, but we'll work on that.
We'll work on that. Okay, good. Also want to echo the comments about the navigation. I mean, our municipalities are pretty strapped, and it's for a savings of $900,000. I think you're going to anger an awful lot of municipalities, so maybe you can rethink that. And I want to thank you for the Transportation Connect Kids. I mean, I think that transportation issue is a huge obstacle for many of our parks to get kids from school districts, because there's no funding for the school districts anymore. I would love to see that expanded in other ways, so it's not just kids, but in some of our urban communities, like for example in my district, getting people from Hudson to some of the our parks. I mean, there's no bus system, there's no, unless you have a car, the entire community is really disconnected from parks that are Olana or Lake Taconic or the other Taconic parks that are right nearby, but
Right.
But are inaccessible because of that. I just really want to ask you though, and this is an issue I know we've talked about, but is there another option around the private-public partnerships? How can we do a better job of getting the investments particularly in our historic sites besides these 40-year leases? And I mean, those don't seem to be such appealing options for a lot of potential developers, because they're still only 40 years. They're investing a huge amount of money. We have these great sites that are deteriorating. Communities are frustrated because they're increasingly eyesores. They're great resources and potential resources for the communities. Is there some, in all of your knowledge and observations of what's worked and not worked, are there some other ways that we could be approaching this?
I think albeit not perfect, but right now we only have 20-year
Right.
authority. I do believe that 40-year leases on those projects where, as you recall, before Governor Cuomo, for 40 years, we didn't even have a capital budget. So there's a degree of a substantial capital budget. There's been a degree of deterioration, and so we need an investment, and so you need to amortize that investment. And there are many partners that would be appropriate, whether it be a little restaurant or bed and breakfast or whatever it may be appropriate to the use. So we haven't come up with another alternative, but we'll think about it for sure, of how do we encourage these partnerships where both we get investment and also operational assistance.
Right, because it is, and when I've raised this with people, and, as you know, there's a number of opportunities in my district, it's, you end up spending all this money and you don't own it in the end, and it's still, even 40 years, it's a big, it's a big bite, and I think, that we do want to see these revitalized and be part of the, of the community and the economy. So would certainly welcome any thoughts that you have on that.
And yours too.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks very much.
That's great.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Senator Patty Ritchie.
Commissioner, I just wanted to take a moment and say thank you for all your hard work. I represent Lake Ontario Shore and also the St. Lawrence River, and parks are extremely important to my district. And whether the improvements are big or small, they're certainly being noticed. Tomorrow, we're going to have a ribbon cutting on the cross-country ski trail. That's just outside of Morristown, and something that may seem little, but it's a big deal for our area.
It's big, yeah.
So I just want to take a minute and commend you on your responsiveness. Every time I've sent a letter in or called your office to try to have something done, you've done your best to address it, and we've gotten, I think, a lot of those issues settled. So I just want to take a minute and say thank you.
Well, and thank you and all of you for, because you are our ears and eyes on the ground, and we really also appreciate all the support, and I appreciate all the dialogue, all the ideas, and all the resolutions. So.
Thank you.
Thank you. The Assembly?
Assemblyman Engelbart.
Thank you for your testimony this morning, Commissioner. It's good to see you. I have several questions. Let me start with the Heritage Area Program. That's a part of the legal responsibilities of your department, and it's understandable how during the big economic downturn of a few years ago, that program was not as high on the priority list in a triage situation that those years presented. We're not in triage now. The governor has dramatically expanded and invested into the I Love New York program and encouraged tourism. I'm just wondering if we can perhaps have a follow-up meeting, because I'm still involved, as you are, with this program. If we might be able to have a follow-up meeting to explore ways to perhaps build a new nexus with the I Love New York and tourism initiatives and integrate this concept into it.
And would love to have a meeting, love to have all your ideas and thoughts and help. And our approach, not even just a triage, has been to weave these heritage areas kind of into the social, cultural, economic fabric of the communities in which they represent and create, and the more they're woven in locally, the more success we will have. And what we've been doing, and actually proactively as a program, not because of lack of resources, is we've been meeting with them and encouraging them to apply for local grants. And I just looked at the numbers, and you know, they've, over the last 3 years, it's $8.5 million. So that's fairly substantial, more than they've been getting ever before. And then they're being woven in by virtue of being part of certain communities into the I Love New York, but we could weave them in even more, and that's real advertising in terms of it's millions of dollars. So how we can, I think it's better having them outside of the agency and more than making sure we channel all the resources, you know, to them that could be available, and educate them and help them in all of that.
Well, they represent a dramatic potential. I was just in Massachusetts yesterday looking at the heritage corridors, mostly federal,
And federal,
that are threaded throughout that state. It's clear that our model is the federal model. I just hate to think that we can't make more of this potential in our own state. I'd love to have a chance to work with you to explore that.
That would be great. I would love to work with you.
Thank you. Nature centers. Again, and during the economic downturn, it wasn't really possible to think about creating new nature centers. We don't have a whole lot of them. We have a few in the parks. Bear Mountain used to have one. I'm not sure it still does. But you mentioned prominently that there's a new state-of-the-art nature center that's going to be at Letchworth. I think that's terrific. I'm just wondering if you could expand upon that just a little bit. Is this something that each of the regions would have one nature center, perhaps, that might be able to go and offer programs at the different parks? What is the model? Is it a not-for-profit partner? Is it state parks personnel? How is it administered?
So we've gone back and done an inventory of all our nature centers, and actually we have over, I think it's, low 20s, in some smaller than others. And we're looking at those in terms of, revitalizing them and making them also available to, if we do, some of the transportation programs, particularly for youth, from urban youth. And then we also have looked at building, new and larger nature centers, and you've got Letchworth, Grafton's coming online. You're going to have one in New York City. We're going to upgrade the one in at Jones Beach. So we're looking all across the system. We're going to fix and revitalize the ones that are there, and then we've looked at our nature parks and areas, and then you're going to see some new visitor nature centers coming online.
I'd like to learn more about it, and again, would welcome a chance to meet with you and talk with you about that. Final question, Zoo Botanical Gardens and Aquariums program, how does that stand currently, the ZBGA program?
The ZBGA?
Yes.
It received a modest bump in the EPF, and everything's going forward, and there are no changes, and we look forward to continuing to give them grants and be partners with them.
Thank you. My time is about up. I just want to also mention Assemblywoman Barrett's concern regarding adaptive reuse of historic sites. She is not alone. There are a number of us that share in that concern. I'd love to have a chance to follow up with that as well.
That would be great.
Thank you.
We're all on the same page. Yeah.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Senator Tom O'Mara.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good afternoon. I just want to follow up again on the Assemblywoman's comments on the leasing, these public-private partnerships, and you and I worked on that a lot, particularly at the end of session last year, and the clock ran out on us, and the Assemblywoman as well. Is there anything in the budget to address those issues of longer-term leases available for private infrastructure development?